Hi guys, good morning.
Morning.
We're going to be talking about curb ramp design and a little bit of ADA access. Rob is going to be my fact checker here, so if there's anything, he's going to check the facts. There you go, Rob. So guidelines and curb ramp scoping and design. A little bit of background on this. As we know, we used the Caltrans standards to design our ADA ramps. And to comply with ADA, as adopted by the Department of Justice, Caltrans follows the 2010 ADA standards. Back in 2017, well, this is the latest one actually. Caltrans prepared a design bulletin that states that the ADA standards, they don't specifically are written for projects in the right of way, but there's some stuff that applies to it. So they are using the 2010 ADA standards. Then the United States Access Board prepared a document for projects within the public right-of-way. It's called ProjectWise. This still is in a draft form and hasn't been adopted. But then FHWA has recommended this document, this ProjectWise document, to use as best practices. Caltrans has also adopted portions of this document for their curb ramp design or access design. It was kind of hard for us before to identify the type of treatment, road treatments or roadway projects that would trigger ADA upgrades. So there was no clear direction. But then even the Department of Justice on their ADA standard did not have a specific or clear direction of what type of projects will trigger curb ramp reconstruction. So back in 2013, the Department of Justice and the Department of Transportation completed a document called Technical Assistance. And it provided some consistency on the type of treatments that will trigger ADA improvements. So that document, it distinguishes, it makes it clear what a maintenance based type of project is. Also in 2015, our own department came out with guidelines on recommending the type of treatments that will trigger ADA improvements. So in our own guidelines, we have a list of different types of projects that will require curb ramp to be installed or upgraded. So if there's no curb ramps, we'll have to install it. And if there's an existing curb ramp, later on I'll show you what we need to check to make sure that we either reconstruct them or we don't have to reconstruct them. So new construction, reconstruction, 3R projects, capital preventive maintenance. In here we have the thickness or the type of work that triggers upgrading those curb ramps. So the list goes up to preventive maintenance and alterations, and that includes this type of treatments. On the our guidelines, they also have the list of projects that will not require curb ramp reconstruction. We don't do these projects anymore. It is cheap seals, slurry seals. This road maintenance is taking care of these projects now. But in case we get to do one of these projects, note of caution is that combining one of these two will trigger a evaluating the existing curb ramps to see if it needs to be reconstructed. So one of these alone doesn't, but if you combine one of the two, it could fall into reconstructing curb ramps. And there's an example here. If you combine a chip seal and a slurry seal, then it will trigger curb ramp reconstruction. So that's a little bit of background on how where we are at now on curb ramp reconstruction. So if we're going to scope our projects, first we need to evaluate the accessible route and if there's any existing curb ramps. Now, the standards or guidelines, there's a safe harbor that we could apply to existing curb ramps. And if the curb ramps previously constructed met the 1991 ADA standards, then we don't have to upgrade them if we meet the safe harbor guidelines. So, well, on a project, once we get a project, we need to evaluate if there's sidewalks, and if there's sidewalks, if there's existing curb ramps. If there's no existing curb ramps, and it's your project is in the list that I previously shown. If there's no curb ramps, you will have to reconstruct those curb ramps using Caltrans standard plans. If there's existing curb ramps, then we will need to evaluate them to see if they satisfy the safe harbor provision. And to do that, we'll need to manually verify the minimum width of the curb ramps. If there's no lip at the bottom of the curb ramp, or anywhere within that curb ramp for that matter, because the curb ramp can meet all of the requirements, but if a section of it is uplifted for like a quarter of an inch, then we'll have to do something to that curb ramp. We'll have to check the running slope that is not more than 8.33, and the flares that are not more than 10%. Got to make sure that the gutter slope is no more than 5%. Then it has to detect them with warning surface. So once we're here, if there's curb ramps, we'll evaluate them. If they meet the requirements to meet the safe harbor, then we just proceed with the payment work, and we don't have to worry about the curb ramps. But if they don't meet this, then we'll have to reconstruct the curb ramps using Caltrans standard plans.
Zay, I got a question.
Yes.
Under the where there's no curb ramp.
Yes.
We have a situation we have no sidewalk, but we have a crosswalk. Now we got to put a curb ramp in, even though it's not going to go anywhere. It's still required.
Well, you're not required to put a curb ramp.
To make a safe harbor or some kind of.
No, if there's no sidewalk, you're not required to put a curb ramp.
Even if there's a crosswalk.
If there's no
Or
sidewalk,
crosswalk.
yeah. Right.
Because well, okay, I have a situation like that on my projects, and they're directed us of doing a curb ramp anyway.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments was that it gives someone
Like
with a disability the chance to actually get outside of the street and onto some sort of upper curb.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't hurt putting it if it's like
It'll be like a refuge.
refuge area, yeah,
This is a
yeah.
refuge
But
area.
if you construct it, then it has to meet ADN standard.
No, that's fine.
And if there's a push button, you got to make sure that push button,
Can relocate it.
if you need to relocate it, you have to relocate it. So it's not just constructing the curb ramp. If there's a traffic signal, you got to make sure that whoever is waiting on that curb ramp has access to, or there's a way for that person to
Right.
push that button.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, as a practice, I usually add them if it's not too much work. Like if you were to relocate those pedestrian pad, probably not. So if it's a very easy fix, I will put them in there as a refuge. So
Well, the issue here is that you can put in a curb ramp, and it has no connectivity to anything.
Right, but you
That's
can use it
fine.
as a
They
refuge,
can-
yeah.
They
They're going in a crosswalk across the street.
right, they go there, they push the button, they wait for the traffic
Yeah.
to clear instead of waiting at the corner.
Yeah, to make it, totally up to you. Then you'd have to construct, in this case, the example, you'd have to construct like 900 or 1,000 feet of sidewalk just to get it to connect somewhere. and we're not gonna do that on this project. But anyway, we'll put the curb ramp in there.
Okay, so then we go back to what we need to check on existing curb ramps. And like I was saying, we need to make sure that this running slope, it's 8.33 or less. In this table that I have here, they ask for the cross slope here to be 2%, but ProjectWise allow us for this cross slope, and I'll get to that later, to be a little bit more than 2%. So just ignore this for now. So we need to make sure that the running slope is 8.33 or less, that there's no lip here, or anywhere in here for that matter, but make sure there's no lip here, that the gutter is flush with the ramp, and that the slope on the gutter is 5% or less.
So you're saying we can still use 8.33% as long as we're not in Caltrans jurisdiction?
Well, this is checking existing, and we'll get to designing.
Oh, this is existing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought this is new.
No, this is existing. Oh, and by the way, this is for case A and B. Case C is A, B, and F. Checking the running slope, that should be less than 8.33. We got to make sure that the width of the ramp is at least 48 inches or 4 feet. The landings on the top of the curb ramp is again 4 feet minimum. And that the cross slope is 2% or less on the landings. When we get to KC, which is a fully depressed, I'm not sure if we are familiar with the different cases, but case A and B, case A is there's no depression on case A. On case B, you depress the curb ramp just enough to get your minimum running slope. Case F is fully depressed, and so this running slope here has to be less than 2%, but the ramps on the side should be 8.33 or less. So AB, and F, we check the running slope to be 8.33. On case F and B, you could have a transition from your landing to the existing sidewalk just because B and F could be depressed at the back of walk. And for case C, it's a fully depressed curb with a 2% cross running slope and 8.33 side ramps. Any questions?
I have a question, Jose.
Yeah.
Can you go back to slide?
How do I go back?
please?
Oh, you had the
One more?
7? Slide 7?
2 more.
Where
Okay.
you have this flow chart. Okay, so when you say on the left there, existing curb ramps meet the requirements to satisfy safe harbor provision?
Uh-huh.
If it's a yes, and you say proceed with work, does that mean that no reconstruction is required?
Curb ramps,
Okay.
right, correct.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
If you say, for instance, you're verifying the safe harbor requirements,
Uh-huh.
and say it's missing just one thing, like a detectable warning surface,
Uh-huh.
can you place a
Yeah.
detectable warning
Yeah.
surface, and you still
Yeah.
get amnesty under the safe harbor?
Correct. If
Okay.
everything else meets the safe harbor requirements, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a difference now in the old days on new construction, where we were allowing contractors to use the cast in place and the bolted, right? Detectable warning surface. Now, if it's a brand new construction, it's just a cast in place. But if you're just retrofitting, then you can just do the detectable warning surface, which is bolted. Yeah.
Jose?
Yes.
Just to follow up on Luke's question, what if it's just like there's no landing? Can you just add a landing, or does that count as touching the ramp?
That is touching the ramp.
So
Yeah, you
can
cannot
also-
just add that landing. There's a few exemptions that I don't want to talk about, but there's areas like in East LA where you have a door right at the back of the curb ramp, and there's no landing because you're not going to create a step. If there's no step, you're not supposed to create a step, make it worse. ADA allows you, but that will be like your last resort. ADA allows you for all, even flares and running slope to be 8.33. But that, again, we should exhaust everything else before we get to that. Any more questions?
Yeah. So the slope in, at the gutter of 5%, that's out of spec. And say you have like a curb ramp that's poured like monolithic, for example, a curb, I guess you got to replace the whole ramp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just for that.
Yes.
With that, you have to watch the flow line, so.
Well, we'll get to that on the
Yeah.
design.
Design.
We just found one brand new, constructed brand new, where the slope on the gutter was 20%. So we have to keep an eye on that. Yeah.
If there's a lip, can you run it down?
If everything else if your running slope is 8.33, that could be an option. But I don't think you will find a curb ramp, existing curb ramp, that you will just need to grind the lip. But that's an option, yeah.
Yeah,
You-
most of the time the gutter is at 8.33, so.
Yeah.
You probably have to add a pad anyway, so you'd have to do once you have to do multiple things, you have to replace the whole ramp anyway, right? Or can you do multiple minor adjustments? Could you grind the lip and add
Well,
a
there's
pad?
things that you cannot do without replacing the whole curb ramp. So you only have very few options to just do like
Right.
maybe you could do like the gutter and replace maybe.
Okay.
There's some cases where they have like, say the ramp is like a herringbone, old standard, so would you be allowed if everything else meets the spec?
The ramp is like what?
It's got a herringbone
Oh.
pattern in the ramp, so everything else meets spec, you can just cut that out and just put in
The detector, yeah.
And then put the detector
Right.
and you're okay,
Yeah,
in that case.
yeah.
Don't know if you guys know what a herringbone is.
Chevron.
Like this.
Yeah, it's like pressed into the concrete.
Yeah, it's scorch it.
They had those for leading the blind people right with the stick. It's pointed.
They used to.
Yeah,
That's what they
an old
thought,
supervisor
yeah.
in road told me that was
Yeah.
for the walking stick for visually disabled.
Right. But we don't do them anymore.
Yeah, no, it's all standard.
Right.
A lot in East
Okay,
LA.
so, yeah, so we're gonna be scoping, the access routes for accessibility. We gotta make sure that, there could be a lot more other things than the list that I have here, but make sure that you identify all the constraints that you have before you design your curb ramps, and that includes like parkway culverts. This one, in all areas of the county, they have that culverts where they take water from one side of the curb return to the other side of the curb return, and many of those areas either don't have a curb ramp or they just kind of grind the curb. So keep an eye on these things. We just had a project with Mark where we had to adjust the flow line a little bit just to make sure that we missed the parkway culvert. Because if you encounter one of these, there's no way you can meet your new construction at 7.5% on your running slope. Keep an eye on catch basins. There's many things we can do around catch basins. We don't have to have a flare. We can construct a curb, but for that you'll have to have like a detail, not just called the Caltrans standard plans, but you'll have a detail. But there are things that we can do to modify that standard plan to go around catch basins, power poles, main holes, maintenance holes. Make sure that if you can acquire right away to try to construct either an A or a B, then we should try to do that. If there's if we have a narrow parkway, but we have the right of way, we should we should remove those encroachments just to make sure that we try to fit the curb ramp. And this is what Rob was talking about. We have to be careful with the street grade because the standard plan calls for that gutter to be 5%, and for you to get a 5% slope on the gutter, what they call for is for the flow line to raise 1 inch. So if you have a very flat road and you're raising the flow line at the curb ramp 1 inch, that means you're going to be trapping water. So you got to make sure that you check the grade of that street. If you have a 3% grade, it's no problem. But if you have a very flat road, then you might have to reconstruct more curbing gutter than needed just for the standard plan, just to make sure that that water is flowing, because otherwise you will not, especially if you're not reconstructing the pavement. If you're reconstructing the pavement, you could have an option of, instead of raising the flow line 1 inch, you can lower the EG 1 inch. But if you're cold milling, that could be an issue. And in the old days, we still do it, I guess, reconstruct only about a foot or 2 foot strip around the new curbing, around the new gutter. But if we have this issue, instead of doing 2 feet, maybe 4 feet will help. But keep an eye on this. If not, you're going to be trapping water. There could be some trees that are on the way. This is also interesting because the house walks, and when I say house walks, I mean house walks that are right behind the curb ramp. If you have house walks, make sure that you request for a permit to enter, because if not, during construction, you'll have an issue, especially if you're doing case B or C. Even A, you might have to request a little bit of, reconstruct a little bit of those house walks. But for sure, B and C, keep an eye on that. You need to get a permit to enter. If you have driveways that are adjacent to the curb ramps, again, B and C, those curb ramps that are depressed, keep an eye on that, because you will have to reconstruct the driveways. If you're depressing the curb ramp, and it's in all parts of the county, there are driveways that are really close to the curb return. So if you're depressing the curb ramp, you have to reconstruct the driveway and depress the driveway, unless you can get 7.5% transition from the curb ramp to the driveway, but it's hard. This could be a conflict, and this is what we were just talking about before. Traffic signals, the most pull boxes, but most important is the push button. The push button has to be in a level area for someone using that curb ramp to be able to push the button. Any questions? Yes.
Does it have to have like a certain space that you said for the level landing?
TNL will take care of that, but yeah, it does.
You know,
Yeah, I think it's about 24 inches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Enough for it.
Yeah.
So it has to be on a level surface.
It has to be in a level
They can't,
surface.
if they can reach it from the slope part of the ramp, that doesn't count. Yeah,
Right, because of the width of the flare, I don't think
Okay.
it's too far, yeah.
Was it like, by level you mean like 1.5%?
Yes. So as we know, we follow Caltrans standards, and 90% of the time, their standard plans will meet whatever design we're doing. If you're deviating from these plans or the Caltrans standard plans, make sure that you prepare a detail for them. We've seen that even calling the standard plans, I was just checking a project that I was just barely constructed, and flares and everything was done to standard except the landing. So if you deviate, just make sure you provide a detail. So case A, B, C, and F are the most common cases used in public right of way. There are exemptions, but most of them should be this. And that was, I think John asked this question. See, Caltrans standard plans nowadays is called, instead of ADA accepts 2% or less, and 8.33 or less, and 10% or less. But because of construction tolerances, Caltrans is calling for 1.5 instead of 2%, and 7.5 instead of 8.33, and 9% instead of 10. So this is just for construction tolerance. And even with this, they're not constructing them to 2%. So make sure that we design to meet this minimums. Especially if we are working within Caltrans jurisdiction. I had a project where I had to give elevation for the new curb ramp because Caltrans is requiring a certification for their curb ramps. And it's not part of this presentation, but they only allow 0.2% difference. So if you're working in Caltrans jurisdiction, Caltrans is not going to allow a 2% landing slope. They will allow max 1.7. Same here, 7.7. So if you work in Caltrans jurisdiction, make sure that either we give them elevations because you will require to sign and stamp
They're making you responsible for it.
you'll be stamping and signing a design, what do you call it? Certification. Yeah, so. And I don't know if you guys saw, there's a video on CBS Channel 2. City of LA was constructing brand new curb ramps, and the workers were there. As soon as they walk away, they went and put a level, brand new curb ramp, and it was not to standard. So the media is out there checking that these things are meeting standards.
Jose, for these slopes, we had a meeting a couple months back that in our green book, the tolerance for error on our survey was more than the tolerance for error that Caltrans was allowed. Was that resolved?
No. Well, Caltrans has it. Yeah, no. And don't forget, we don't give survey shots for all our curb ramps because it would be so expensive for survey to go out there and stake all of this. It's just for Caltrans jurisdiction, just to make sure that when we certify that, we make sure that the contractor has built it to code. So we're going to design it. So for case A, you will need a minimum parkway width of 14 feet for a 6-inch curb. For an 8-inch curb, you will need 17 feet. So it's rarely do we have enough room to construct a case A. Case A is the one that has no depression here. So you're going to go from the flow line to match what the existing sidewalk is out there. Make sure that, again, if you're deviating from the standard, for Caltrans standard, make sure you prepare a detail. And make sure again that water will flow through here because this point here, which is right here, actually is that's what I have this blue line here. From this point to this point here, it's 2 feet on each side. It has to be 5%. So what they do is they raise this point out 1 inch. And if you're not reconstructing the pavement, that's the only option you have. If you're reconstructing the pavement, you might be able to modify this and lower the EG so you can get you 5%. Because I don't know if you guys know that our standard slope on the gutter is 8.33. So you got to make sure that water flows when we design these curb ramps. This is case B. Case B, you will depress case B back here as much as you need to depress it to get your 7.5% here. And for that, you will need more than 8.5% to be able to fit. So between 8.5%, I'm sorry, 8.5 feet and 14 feet, the only option that you have is case B, and you will depress this enough to get your 7.5% right here. And in all of this, make sure the water will be flowing. Oh, one thing I forgot, because these things are being scrutinized so closely now, is that we are going to make sure that this here, which is the curb ramp, meets this standards. So if you're not reconstructing the sidewalk, and for sure the sidewalk is not going to meet this standard, we should add like a 2-foot strip on each side of the ramps to join existing. So if you're not doing a new sidewalk around the curb ramp, make sure you add like 2 feet of sidewalk, so that the contractor has no excuses saying that this is not to standard because he had to join existing conditions. So make sure you add about 2 feet on each side. And that goes for case A, all cases, because no one guarantee you that this is not even 2%. It could be more than that. So if you're not reconstructing the sidewalk, make sure you add, in this case it will be a little bit more than 2 feet, but we have to make sure that it's construct standard, so it might be something like perpendicular like this. Just make sure you add additional sidewalk so they can join existing.
And was it the maximum slope on that strip is 5%?
What's that?
The maximum slope
Where?
to join from?
No, that is whatever it is.
Whatever
It's just giving you some buffer so that you can join existing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a maximum? Otherwise, you have to increase the length of the feet, or
It should be less than 8, right? 8.
Oh, it should be. Oh, yeah. That's why 2 feet. We're thinking 2 feet should be more than enough, because we're not improving the access here. We're just trying to reconstruct the curb ramp to standard. So should be about 2 feet should be fine, because this should take care of it. They should set from here to here 7.5%, whatever that is, and then just enough for them to transition. Because when you don't have that strip, this guy is going to go from here to try to join here, but because the existing sidewalk, it could be anything.
Yeah, even if the sidewalk is at 2%, you will need transition from 1.5 to 2, so that will take care of it.
Yeah.
But if the if the sidewalk is at 3%, that's another story.
but like in case B, you are depressing, so in other words, you are lowering.
Oh no, but that fully depression is back here, from here to here.
But then your 7.5, how long does that have to be?
Well, until you reach 7.5. Well, no, 7.5%, or if you're chasing that slope, 15 feet max.
And the flare in the front, or the-
Everything.
Everything.
If you're chasing the slope, no more than 15
And
feet.
how would you join it? You would join it parallel to the curb, or you actually join it to the flare?
You mean perpendicular?
Well, you're saying that for your approach, you could go 15 feet. So once you reach your 15 feet, how would actually you would join it?
No, you're talking.
For that one, for your
Here.
approach.
So let's say you're chasing the slope,
Yes.
and you don't get to catch it at 7.5%. Then your maximum will be 15 feet, whatever the slope is.
And when you join at that point, how do you join that point to your curve? Because I'm saying, is that actually perpendicular to whatever it is, or?
Well, at this,
I'm not sure what.
yeah, I think what's going to happen is you're going to extend this out, and this will get extended a little bit.
Yes.
Right? So this is going to move a little bit.
But you see, this is actually 9, so you're probably going to reach this one
Correct.
before that
Right.
one.
That's
Correct.
what it
So
is.
when
you're
you
gonna-
join here, did you join to this point,
Yes,
or you join
to join
actually
Oh, you're saying perpendicular to here.
to the curb?
Yeah, perpendicular, I guess.
It doesn't have to be. What you can join, because this is only 10%, right?
Yeah.
Oh, 9%.
Yeah, yes.
So you're going to push it out a little bit, right? That one a little bit more because 7.5. Not really, because you're already higher So you're actually gonna be,
Very close to existing.
yeah,
You're gonna get this, that's what I'm saying.
No,
No.
you're not. No.
almost.
No, you're
oh,
not.
shit, touch screen.
No, you're not. You're not.
So yeah, because this is higher now, right?
This
Yes.
year.
So this
year.
is shorter.
So you're saying you're actually gonna be able to be a little bit
Something
more
like that, yeah.
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 So that's case B. Case C, as I would say, is like the fully depressed, and this one here, the landing is down here, and it's 1.5%. This one here is 7.5%, and you use case C whenever you have parkway width of less than 8.5%. Oh, feet.
Jose, where does that 15 feet, is that an ADA?
It's ProWalk.
The 15-foot.
ProWalk.
Flare.
ProWalk.
I'm sorry?
ProWalk.
Pro one. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, the ADA, they're very similar, but ProWalk sometimes is a little bit more lenient. And so this slope here, max should be 7.5% or 15 feet if you're chasing the slope.
On one of these, what's the minimum width?
The minimum width,
Yeah.
it could be 3 feet.
Could be 3.
Yeah, as long as you can fit your, or 3.5, I guess. Oh, 4.
4
Yeah.
4 inch width.
Mm-hmm. But you won't find, it's rare to find something like
Is
this.
it 48 inches or 50 inches?
48.
50.
50, right? Because Caltrans is 50, right?
52, yeah, 50 inches.
Yeah. So,
Well, Caltrans is for 50 inches.
No, because it's
well,
it's brand new.
that's
88.
different. ADA is different. ADA is 4 feet.
But
What's existing?
because you're
But
building this new, you have to build the
50,
Caltrans,
50.
so it's 50.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have the space, you can deviate from there, as long as you have the 4, yeah.
ADA allows you 36.
Yeah, that's the
Right,
minimum
yeah,
for
that's
ADA.
the
So
very-
you'd
but I
have to do
don't-
like an exception, and then
No.
you need a detail or something,
No,
right?
ADA is.
Oh,
But don't forget that I mentioned that ProWalk is best practice. So 4 should be the minimum.
4 should be the
Yeah,
minimum.
36 is like.
But if you don't have it,
Actually allows you 32 on a very short, like 2 feet long segment. But, yeah, we should not get to that. So case F is for T intersections, and we gotta be careful on this one because the Caltrans standard plans doesn't show a depression here. So if your parkway width is narrow, you're gonna have to depress this case F back here, and you're gonna have to have a transition up and down. But on your 20 call out on your plans, you're gonna have to call case F modify. And you might wanna have a detail showing what the modification is. Yeah, so it'll be something like this, but Caltrans standard plans doesn't show this. It shows it like this. So anything like this will be a modified Caltrans standard plan. Also, I'm not showing here, but we will need about 2 feet of transition from your 5% to join your 8.33 gutter. So about 2 feet on each side. So the location of the curb ramp is usually at half delta, but you can move it to avoid constraints if there's anything that somewhere like in this area, and if you could rotate a little bit on the axis, just make sure that on your plans you show what the angle is or where you want that curb ramp, because the contractor, he just follows this here, half delta. Make sure that, like I was telling before, make sure that this here, you take care of this. Most of the time we'll have to go back and reconstruct in private property, and for that you need to request permits to enter. And make sure you take care of that, because during construction this could stop the project if we don't have, because you don't want to leave a step here. If you're putting a case B, you don't want to leave a step here. You want to reconstruct that house walk. So make sure you ID that early in your design process. Yeah, because we just don't want to put a step if there's no step.
So, Jose?
Yes.
On that last one, is it okay to do the landing in private property?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
no, because this guy could come here and put a wall.
Okay.
Yeah, no. No, you want to do everything in county, public right away. And again, like I've said before, make sure you look at this out. It's hard, maybe it's hard to see, but the flow line goes up, and we're probably trapping water here. So make sure you guys.
How can you get
Take out-
water to flow, though? I mean, if you have to raise that so that the gutter's 5%, the other gutter's 8.33 on each side of it, so that gutter has to be raised there.
Uh-huh.
How can you avoid having a high point there?
You cannot avoid it.
So then your water's not going to flow.
Well, that's why you either reconstruct more,
Yeah, you go.
or
back.
or like I was saying, adjust
Or-
your EG here.
Right. If you're reconstructing the roadway, you
I-
lower the edge of gutter.
I leave that up to you when you
Okay.
design, but you either reconstruct more, yeah.
Okay.
You either reconstruct up.
So-
Jefferson is going through that right now. All right, you either reconstruct up more curb and gutter, but you got to make sure you water from this. I don't think water is flowing here.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that 5%, that picture you had before, that's gonna apply to your cross gutter too.
What 5%?
In front, the 5% in front of the flow line. The photo before,
If there's a cross gutter.
Here,
cross gutter.
if there's a cross gutter, yeah, it's
It's
different.
gonna be the same.
Well, no, there's no agency that tells us how long that 5% should be, so we think it's just 2 feet. Even Caltrans say that no one says how wide that should be, or how long. So if the gutter is 5%, that's all we need. But that's what I'm saying, that somebody here said that it's a good practice to do 4 feet instead of just 2 feet of pavement. So that way you improve the cross slope approaching the curb ramp on the.
Also take for your saw cut 4
Right,
feet wide,
right, 4
not
feet.
2 feet.
Yeah, not 2 feet. It's a good practice. Oh, yeah, it's a good practice to construct probably 4 feet of pavement along the gutter instead of 2 feet. It will improve that. And you cannot move the location of this curb ramp too far to the BCR, because from this point here to here, you have to have a minimum of 4 feet. So from the curb ramp, from the ramp edge to this point should be 4 feet minimum.
That point being the white stripe. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you request survey for, if you have constraints that you think, like if you need to reconstruct more of the curb and gutter, then I will request survey, just to make sure that the water flows.
Mm.
Any more questions?
We're getting some, these SB1 projects come to mind where they want road maintenance to go in and do the ADA work before we go in and do the road work.
Yeah.
Would this be one of these, do we want them to not touch the curb ramps and we do the curb ramps and the road maintenance does all the sidewalk repairs?
No, they can do all the curb ramps. I've been to road maintenance and I've shown them this too, so they know.
Okay.
Yeah. If not, when we go out and do the walk with road maintenance, if they're going to do the curb ramp, we should bring this up and say, hey, you guys are going to do the curb ramps, you're going to be in charge of doing the curb ramps. Make sure that, because they have engineers also, make sure that the water will flow. If it's pretty flat, we gotta, yeah. We have a project where they're doing the curb ramps.
I said we can get in a situation where they can make the water flow, but instead of it being 5%, now it's 8% coming in there, and then it wouldn't be.
No, they have to construct them to standard. I'm not sure on your question, but no, they have to.
Okay.
Jose, I have a question.
Yes.
On the previous, I know you said I'm not allowed to ask, but on the previous one where you said we could angle the curb ramp to avoid stuff, is how much can you modify that before you're reaching?
Oh, not much.
Yeah, because
Just
you'd have
enough,
sight distance issues,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, not much.
But there's not.
I leave it that up to you as an engineer.
It's engineering judgment.
Yeah,
You are licensed.
Yeah. But not much.
By that much.
Because you still have to have your 4 feet. So
And then you need, if you have a crosswalk, you need to have 4 feet from this point to your line.
that's if it's striped. What if it's not striped?
Then there's no crosswalk, then there's.
So you can push it further.
Right. Okay, so guys, just make sure, make sure you get right away, because this could impact your schedule, when you have situations like that. But see, in this case, Mark made an engineering judgment that he's reconstructing way back, and because they have steps, we put back steps, but we have to reconstruct back. So you have to prepare a right-of-way ID map. Make sure that it doesn't affect your schedule. Either permits prepare for if you're gonna acquire right-of-way. If you just need permits to enter, you will need a right-of-way ID map, and to reconstruct those walkways and steps. Really quick on pedestrians access routes. So ProWalk says that their minimum is 4 feet, and if it's less than 5 feet, provide passing intervals 200 feet with squares of 5 by 5. ADA, Department of Justice, they allow 3 feet. And that's what I was on your project, John, when you asked me, that's what I was telling you on the driveway. If you exhausted all of your options, then you could probably do it 3 feet, and we should be okay. If you see that anything is uplifted when you're doing your walk on the sidewalk, and if it's more than 1/4 of an inch, that has to be reconstructed. Or on Mark's project, we talked to road maintenance, and they were willing to grind some of that because it's not much. Now, bus stops, I don't know if most of us, we really don't pay too much attention to it, but you guys need to have an 8 by 5 landing. And this is because of, especially on the front door of the bus, because they have this ramp that drops down. That ramp is 4 feet long, so you need about another 4 feet for this person to get off the ramp and turn. So you need a landing about 8 by 5.
That's in the parkway.
That is in the parkway, bus stops, yes. Sometimes we have planting areas and it's not
Right.
paved,
So you
so
gotta
you
pave
want to
that
make sure,
8 by
yeah,
5.
right. Well,
But
I
if it's
usually
concrete
do a
back,
lot
you
more,
don't need
yeah,
it.
I just do
Yeah.
more than that. Okay.
You only need one of those landings for buses?
What I do if it's I try to propose paving the whole thing, but if the property owner comes back and say something, I will just do kind of the front end, because on the back they don't have that ramp, only in the front. And so when you design driveways, it's minimum 2% and a 4-foot pathway minimum. We have a template that we use to make sure that this point here will not scrape when the vehicles go up here. So if you run that template and this point scrapes on using, then you're gonna have to depress this driveway, and you're gonna have to go back and reconstruct on private property. Then you're gonna have to make sure that to join this depressed driveway, to join existing sidewalk, you got to have a ramp that meets ADA standards that should be 7.5 or less. All right, so you got to meet this 4 feet, this 2%, and also that doesn't scrape. If it scrapes, depress it, reconstruct back here, and make sure you got your ramp. This is if we have enough parkway width, but if we don't, if this is about 4 feet, then you have to depress the whole driveway so that you gain your 2% cross slope, and you really have to reconstruct the driveway behind the property line. And again, you're gonna have ramps on this side. Yeah, sure.
So be careful when you depress the driveway if the property is lower than the street. So by lowering it, you're gonna open up you're gonna push the water to the property, and then we got to because of that. So just be careful with that.
In that photo on the top, you gotta be careful too, like, probably be looking at sections where those curves, like, you're probably gonna have to reconstruct that too.
Right, and that brings a good point. This is a nice picture, an easy one, but if you have a gate that has a rail here, you're gonna have to reconstruct, relocate that rail, and if you'll just be careful. Okay, you have to adjust gates, and If it's a swing, it's no problem, but if it's on rails, it gets a little bit more complicated because you might have to reconstruct more concrete or more surface if the rail extends past this point. Let's say if the gate slides this way, you gotta, and you're depressing it, you have to depress this, and yeah, be careful.
Also, that if it's swing gate, is a problem too.
Oh yeah.
You see, swing gate, if you go like high elevation, you have to cut the slope to make it flat. Sometimes we just make it swing, and well, there's enough room. Then we adjust the gate. Then you see that sometimes we have to provide the space between ground to.
Oh, the 6 inch, yeah.
They complain there, the dogs can
yeah,
get out.
that's a good point.
And one
Yeah.
time they went out there and complained, they said, little tiny chihuahua going below that. No matter what you do, they're crying out and they're complaining over to us. So.
Yeah, okay.
Jose, you said the maximum clearance for the gate would be 6 inches
Well,
from the ground?
I guess.
Is there a standard for that?
No, no.
Puppy size?
So this is the
Chihuahua gap.
Yeah. So landing thing. Oh, shoot. I want you guys to read this, please. Oops. All right.
Everybody say yes? Yes, they read it. Okay, good. I'm a witness.
Questions?
I got a question on
Yes.
going back to when you're evaluating existing ramps and the herringbone pattern. So when you're just adding in the detectable warning on top of a herringbone,
Well,
No, you have to replace it.
Reconstruct.
Yeah.
you can't do the both.
No.
Okay.
No.
I've seen it though.
Yeah, but any more questions?
I got,
Yeah.
regarding the,
I'm not done, guys. There's one. He needs to do his presentation, so yes.
oh, okay.
Wait, you said questions.
Oh yeah. That's right. Well, I'm done, but now Rob is going to show you the future of
We can take a few questions and then we go to Rob.
Okay, moderator. Say.
Question, if we're doing like say a long stretch of brand new sidewalk, would we do that at 1.5% cross slope, or you just do 2%?
I would start using that 1.5 just to make sure that they do it. Yeah,
like,
yeah,
curb
yeah,
ramps, it would
yeah,
make it easier.
yeah. Oh. We should start calling it
Maybe we should-
1.5.
yeah, we should change
Instead
our
of
standard
2%.
then.
Oh, there's no standard.
Of course.
No, it's just a detail. We should change it to 1.5%. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
On curb ramps that, like on the cases that require curbs and the retaining curbs, like for case B and C, is there a max height that those curbs can be?
No, no.
Just until you meet.
But I can tell you this: if there's like a parking lot, for instance, then you will put a handrail just to make sure that no one goes over that and trips. If there's nothing there, like if it's a planting area, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dean's not here, but he still had questions.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit on the deviations. He was wondering what sort of deviations, or what can you speak on, let's say deviations on the detectable warning surface, the size of that, if you don't have proper like right-of-way length. Also ramp slopes, deviations on ramp slopes, and flare slopes.
No, there's no deviations on ramp slope.
At all?
No.
Oh.
No.
But I know you mentioned earlier that if there are any sort of deviations, then you just kind of.
What I'm saying, deviations from the standard plans, not for ADA standard. From Caltrans standard plans, yeah, deviate from that, trying to meet, still trying to meet ADA. Mark is working, and we're not doing really Caltrans standard plan, but we're still meeting ADA. So there's no deviation from the 7.5%, or 8. And ADA is 8.33, but there's no deviation from that. Didn't you know that?
Caltrans can be a problem when you with that 7.5% if you don't have enough right away, for example. I think that's when you want to go to the.
Oh, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go through 8.33 anymore. They don't construct it. When you go and check it with your level, it's more than that.
Well,
The only reason Caltrans,
8%.
Caltrans that's not a standard. Caltrans, well, it's a construction standard, but not a required standard for ADA. ADA is 8.33. All they're doing is trying to be safe and to make sure that when they construct that thing, it will be less than 8.33. Because if you set it at 8.33, most likely it'll be higher than 8.33. Chris, any other questions from Dean?
No, that was it.
Okay.
I have one real quick one.
Yes.
The thing regarding the vault the full box relocations, even if we're gonna have to adjust them, we should probably estimate it as a full box.
The what?
The full box, even if it has to be adjusted only, not relocated necessarily. You should still be estimating for the full box replacement. I hear a lot of times that they try to break around it, and they wind up breaking the full box, something like that. So even if we have to adjust it, we probably should put in an estimate as replacing the full box.
Sure. This is beyond the presentation, but yeah.
Be careful with the full box. I would call TNL to have them look at it, because if the wiring is not the standard, they might have to upgrade them. So you don't just want to
That could
adjust
turn
them
into a more expensive.
to current
Yeah.
standard. So they might have to tear up the whole system because of that.
If it's an old system.
Yeah.
Yeah, we usually do run it by, especially if
Okay.
Right.
considering relocating.
So Rob is going to talk about the future of evaluating existing curb ramps. And this is awesome, guys. We've been working on this for what, 6
So
months?
yeah, basically the county's mandated to have a transition plans for ADA, and we've been talking about this for the last, I don't know, maybe 15 years. So we're coming to that. So RMD and us have been working on this app to collect all the curb ramps that we have within the county.
We have nothing to do with the app. It's just the information we're collecting. That's what we.
Well, we helped out. We helped out with the sketch, did we?
Yeah. The sketches.
So I'm going to request an iPad for us. So whenever we do our projects, we should go out and collect all the information about curb ramps. So it's very simple. You just click that. Oh, it's already here. So that's you click the collect tab there, and you wait. And wait, there you go. So you got it. First thing to do is you just go to the location of the specific curb ramp. You just stand there, and you click that button right there, and it should take you to the exact location of the curb ramps. And then I guess it's not working.
Is that linking to like your GIS or your location data for the iPad, basically? Is that what it's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever, it's not working. So, and then you go to the question, is there an existing curb ramp at that particular location? Let's say you have one. You say yes. And then the next question is, just ignore this one for now. Potential Caltrans ramp, because if you have, if it's at the on-ramp or off-ramp, we don't know who owns that curb ramp. It could be Caltrans, could be us. So let's say, oh, he added all this information. So enter year curb ramp was construction. We don't have this information.
I don't know why did he. Well, we'll talk about.
Well, anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna skip this. I'm gonna skip this question, and then the next question is the location near park, hospital, school, library, and what have you? Let's say yes. Is there existing pedestrian access? Let's say yes. Is there a marked crosswalk? Yes or no? Let's say you say no for now.
No, say yes.
I'll say yes.
So we can see that for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are. So we're collecting this information too, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, is there a minimum of 4 feet space in front of the curb ramp?
This one here.
Right there. So
The,
yes
the
or no?
crosswalk, not the curb.
Right.
Yeah.
Say yes, and then we go to the curb ramp itself. I'm sure by now you're familiar with the cases, right? So let's go with pick a case.
B.
B.
I said B. B. Okay, there we go. Is there a lip at the base of the ramp?
The lip over here.
It's just,
Is that asking about
no,
the
there we go.
existing case?
Existing. This is existing.
Existing
Yeah.
case, yes.
This is-
So, all right, is there a lip? Let's say no. Go to the next question. Gutter slope percentage. All right, let's do 4%. Done. You continue. The slope. I'm gonna do 9%.
No, make it.
Make it good.
Right, yeah,
All right, let's
eight,
do good.
eight,
8%. Landing depth is 4. So
What?
Because the landing.
Make it 5.
it should be 4.
Make it 5.
Nope. I think it was the gutters.
Do you basically like enter or get out of it first name?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this particular curve lamps will comply to the ADA. So, but you have to go through the remaining questions basically, like landing width. Let's say another 4. No, this is 5. Yeah.
5. Yeah.
5. And then running slope percentage 2%.
No, 1.5 is new.
Well, it's still good though. 2% is good. Let's say 1.5.
How do you know if it's asking you in feet or in inches? Some of them are in inches, some of them are in feet.
You're using a lot of them when you're doing this, so it's taking a percentage.
But the width
But
is
like
taken-
4, that's in
Oh,
feet.
it's taken in feet,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not inches.
So-
Well, like
everything is in
width.
feet.
Yeah.
Everything
If they
is
ask
in
for
feet.
width, I mean.
No, but everything is in feet. There's nothing in
You gotta
inches.
convert it to feet.
Oh,
Okay, so always convert to feet.
Yeah, everything
Oh,
is
you're talking
feet.
about inches?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just like it's 50
There's nothing
inches,
in
but
inches.
like we
No.
convert it so.
Everything in feet. Yeah.
Landing slope 2%.
That's a good thing. We probably would ask him to add that.
Yeah, just
That
like
all
in
makes
inches
it
or in feet.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
Ram width 5 feet. And then the side ramps is another
9.
9%.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then this one 2%. No, next is 3%.
No, that's mine.
Bro. Ninth
And-
measurement is left ram running slope.
I think it asked about the right, and now it's asking about the left.
Left, yeah. And then left ram cross loop, let's say 3%. And then you just have to go through this basically to collect all the data. Say 2%. They shouldn't have this measurement in here. Oh, let's say 15. That's good.
Like crashing now. Just put whatever.
Yeah, and then percentage measurement, right ram close. You want me to crash it?
Yeah, just put a high number.
But it's not going to stop.
So
Yeah, it's gonna collect
at
the
some
data.
point, it's proposed that we're supposed to follow these procedures so we can start like having inventory for each ramp.
Right, right,
Yes?
right.
Have you ever
So,
considered like not only you but whoever's working on this? Have they considered maybe like it will take longer than field visits? You know?
no, so this is how it works. If you go out there and start doing it, and you will do about 5 or 6. Out of those 6, if 3 don't comply, it'll stop. This one was just a presentation to show you guys how many more questions, but you wouldn't do more than 5.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
I thought it was meant for every. just
No,
to
no,
make it
no,
for every-
no, not at all. No,
Okay,
no,
I see.
no.
Okay. thank
So yeah, so basically it's just collect the data that's out there, and then we'll compile them, and then we will record it basically however many non-compliance got ran, and then we'll create a program that eventually will take care of all these programs to bring it to standards. So
But if the features keep meeting the requirements, yeah, you just
it will
keep
continue.
them. But if you don't meet the requirements, like
It will just stop.
3 or 4, then it stops. Yeah.
It's like a choose your own adventure. You go till it doesn't meet, and then
Yeah,
will
but
tell you.
mostly you don't go more than 6.
Yeah, let's do one that is, like the gutter is more than 5%. We just stop basically. So you don't have to spend your time like measuring every single one of them.
Right, you only have to measure things if the other things have been compliant.
yeah.
Right.
That's all.
But most of the time, it's like.
But so you guys say you guys want to create a network of all these curb ramps so that finally we can go back and do a project for all these ramps. But we would only be out measuring curb ramps if we're going to put them on a project. So if
Our
it doesn't
projects. These are
comply,
projects.
we would update it anyway.
Right.
So there wouldn't be a network of curb ramps that don't meet requirements because they're already going to get done on projects. So why would we do another project to go?
Well,
Like if-
this is what
it's like
happened.
if other people are out there doing like a different kind of project, they can still keep inventory of
And
the
we do
route.
this anyway. I don't know if you've done road project already. But
I'm
you have,
working on one now, that's why.
well, you're supposed to go out there and make sure that you document what the existing conditions of that ramp
Okay.
are.
Of every single ramp.
Of every single ramp.
But if I'm replacing them all, then they're all going to be replaced. So it's just.
But what happens is that sometimes we go out to sign plans and the project doesn't get constructed.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
that way you guys know, oh, we still have all these.
Now, once your project goes to construction division will have these too.
And they'll check them off. This one's done, this
Yeah,
one's done, this
if they
okay.
meet, but new ones don't. Yeah.
No, for existing.
I think we get the point.
But you guys have you have any questions? It's very simple to use, very user friendly, idiot proof, I think, right?
Once we get
I'm saying,
the,
but
once,
it's easy.
well,
I apologize for that.
Sammy did it too. Once we get the tablets, Rob will do another presentation on this.
Yeah, it's
All right?
very simple.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm gonna request 2 iPad for us. So once we get it, whenever you do your other project, you're gonna take it out there and collect all the data. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
You'll be able to see it on a map actually.
Right.
And that saves in this app too, so if we do a bunch of them in the field, we can then go back to the car and
Yes.
look at them and that way we know. we've
Yeah.
input
Once you collect,
Yeah. Sammy just used it like 2 weeks ago, and he's been here 3 weeks. How was it, Sammy?
He's an expert, right?
Yeah.
You're an expert, right?
All right, guys.
Is this the GIS collector app then, basically?
Yeah.
Can we bring our own iPad until you get your
Yeah,
iPad?
if
Just
you,
download
Thank
the
you.
app
yeah,
and
if you
log
want to
in?
do that, that's fine. You just have to go to app one, two, three.